Mastery Podcast. I am Scott Tousignant of MetabolicMasterpiece.com, along with Bryan Krahn of BryanKrahn.com. There goes my earbuds. Today we are going to be talking about deadlines. Bryan just wrote a killer post that blew up the internet yesterday called Secrets of Getting Ripped That No One Talks About and Few Understand. Absolutely, I really think it's the best piece of writing that I've seen in the fitness industry, and especially on the topic of being ripped. Well, frickin' done, Bryan. It's been great to see the response that it's generated out there. Actually, just reading the comments on your blog, and I shared it on my page, and hearing comments from people who have read it, it's really resonated with a lot of people, and just seeing the discussion that it's gotten going, it's been outstanding. I think it's a really important topic, and I think it kind of what I found interesting is that I was nodding my head throughout the article and just thinking this is brilliant. It's exactly what people need to hear. And on the same page, I was thinking I just wrote an article last week where I laid out my entire 12-month plan for that included fat loss phases, muscle building phases, maintenance phases with concrete deadlines. So here I was talking about why I wanted set deadlines in there, and then you're saying screw deadlines.
I love your article. I'm going to copy that. I just maybe not as an article, but just for my own training, because I think it's great to have planned phases like that. I especially like to work them around like where my life is going to be. Yes. Like if I know I'm going to be traveling, that's probably not a good time to be knee deep in a really intense phase. But no, I love that. I love that piece. But I think what you did and what I'm trying to do is like that's what you aspire to. But so many people when they're just kind of getting into this, or they've been training a few years, those deadlines can screw them up big time. Especially if they don't have coaching. Or if they have bad coaching, because a hard deadline can be, it can cause a lot of anxiety. And make you do a lot of really, really stupid decisions just out of fear, out of pressure. So that was what I was getting at. You're kind of like above the audience that I was writing to. But yeah, I'm glad you got some takeaways from it though. Tons.
All overall, not just about deadlines and everything, but having your powerful why, which has been a big part of always knowing what drives me to do what I do. So lots of great takeaways. We'll link to that down below. But really, your article didn't just kind of go against my advice. Not really necessarily against, because you did say in the article that you aspire to hit that stage where I'm at this, and it's taken me. I've been at this for like 25 years, and I finally getting to the point where I need to freaking plan shit and get things concrete. I'll explain a little bit more about that in a minute, but in general, you always hear that advice: set that concrete deadline. And I think that's what really spurred on a lot of these 12-week transformation contests that we see out there, is having that deadline, having that urgency, even tying an event into a deadline. It's something that I've preached for a very long time, and I do find when I have a deadline there, whether it's a reunion or a vacation, I do get a little more fired up to achieve my goal. But man, more times than not, I have failed. I have entered, I would say in the past, especially like 10 years ago, when I was really unhappy with where I was at, I was 50 pounds fatter. I was looking for that incentive, that motivation to get me over that hump. To why am I always good for a few days and then falling off the wagon? I thought the transformation contests were answers for that, because it had that deadline in there, and there was a chance of winning a prize. There was all these incentives, yet I wasn't following through, and then I beat myself up. There I go. I didn't finish another transformation contest. What's wrong with me? How come I can't? So you really play those mental games, start beating yourself up. Then you're like, fuck it. Why am I even doing this to begin with? Why do I want to lose? Why I just be like everyone else out there? And so having that deadline and failing to hit it is it can cause a lot more stress, anxiety, and really send you off in the wrong direction if you're not careful. And I think a lot of what we teach and what you mentioned in there, the importance of embracing the process and not really making it. It's good to have that deadline. I think you have to have that deadline. And for me, like what I did with my article, laid it all out, 12 months. I had that big picture. I'm not thinking about the big picture right now. Like my end goal, I want to gain 2 pounds of lean muscle mass this year. I probably want to finish like 12 months from now. We want to be a little bit leaner than what I am right now. So I want to be improved by then. But I thought about that. I put that goal out there, but then I broke that process down into phases, and I broke those phases down into separate individual workouts and monthly goals, and I broke those down into weekly goals and progression. So getting down to just focusing on the process. What do I need to do today? Because what I need to do today doesn't seem so daunting to achieve my goal thinking about what I got to do for the week. What do I got to do this week? I got to make sure I'm in like a 3,500 calorie deficit. I got to make sure I'm getting in my 5 to 6 work. It becomes, you start thinking, getting a little bit too much, and then you start thinking, well, for the month I've got to drop 4 pounds, or for the year I've got to achieve this goal. It becomes, boom, so overwhelming. But today I got to work out. I got to eat 4 solid, nutritious meals that hit my caloric and macro targets. I can do that. Woohoo! It doesn't seem so daunting. So focusing on the process and enjoying it every step of the way is really, those little things add up. Those are more important than the single. If you can focus on the daily process, the daily tasks, that's way more important than having a one day deadline to achieve that goal. Your goals for the day is way more important than a 12-week deadline. Because it just seems it's so far in the, like 12 weeks it's short. It's not a lot of time to get in shape. For some people it's the right amount of time. For some they need more, but it's far away. 3 months is a long time, and it's a short time. Same thing. But think about today is key.
Well, I think the big thing, the issue that I have with deadlines, with the exception of like a really kind of experienced physique pro like yourself, is that you never know how your body's going to respond. I mean, like it doesn't always, it rarely does exactly what we want it to. So there's trial and error, and this is assuming you do everything perfect, man. Mm-hmm. Like this is assuming you follow like life, all the stars align, and you get your meals in and you're hitting the targets. Like we're assuming all that, you nailed that. Still the body might not respond. Like it's not a math equation. Like it's not, if I, you mentioned like a 3,500 calorie deficit for the week. I mean that doesn't always pan out.
It's just rarely.
It looks great on paper, but it's like shit. And then you factor in, well, what if my kid gets sick, or what if I'm traveling for work, and I probably, like just things that come up. So, I mean, I don't want to make it sound like I'm watering down the process, because when the rubber hits the road, you got to focus, you got to execute. And having a deadline can help with that. But I mean, I guess just working with so many people, it's just focusing on the day to day and kind of letting the end goal take care of itself has just been so much more productive. As soon as people start looking ahead a bit too much, especially if they're not in that experienced place like you are, like, I got clients who do this. Like they're with me for 2 weeks and they're like, so in 3 months, should I switch to a strength phase? I'm like, well, how about we talk in 3 months, man? Like, how about we just get through what we're doing right now and see how your body responds, see how you look, see how you feel, where your life is at. Mm-hmm. I think it's human nature to always be looking ahead, but the more you can kind of focus and be in the moment, then on what needs to be done right now, just so much more successful. You just add up those successful days,
Yeah. It gives you, brilliant point. It gives you a lot more victories to celebrate. Rather than opportunities to get down on yourself. I didn't hit my deadline, and you can end up beating yourself up there. Where if you have your goal for the day and you do it, boom, victory, woohoo! Yay me! I did something in the right direction. You have a lot more. Chances are throughout the week you're gonna have a lot more victories than you do a bad day, and you can't, because you're just focusing on the process. Having a bad day, you realize, it's not all that bad. I've strung together a bunch of good days here, and I can, like I said, it's more manageable to just focus on those daily tasks. I think that's where you really find a lot more joy, and I think when you're more present in that moment, you're reducing the stress of the whole process as well, which can just make things easier.
And just all those, like, the I have a client right now. I had him get a dry erase calendar, and this is classic Arnold shit. Like every day that he trains as per his schedule, one line goes through it, and every day that he hits 90% accurate on his meal plan, another line goes through it, so it makes an X. So I'm like, at the end of the week, do we have a bunch of X's, or do we have a bunch of just like haphazard lines?
Yep.
And it resonated with him right away. He actually has a military background. He's like, this is what I need. I need these shorter term goals and things that I can look at, very, very on a kind of focused level. And so, yeah, it's just a much more, for most people, especially when they're just getting going, it's just a much more effective approach.
100%. That has worked so well for me in the past. I did that exact same strategy, and I had a big ass calendar. So I made sure. It was very visible to me. And like, there's two things that does is that. Yeah. Okay. Right now I'm just focused one line. All right. I get my one. There's my exercise. Woohoo! I did that. 2 lines. Boom. All right. That's excellent. Next day you're focused on that line, and then the other line. But the beauty of that is that at the end of the week. So say you have a bad day. You look at your calendar, you're like, I'm doing pretty damn good here. One line today or no lines today. When I look at everything else in the big picture, this is freaking nothing. This is like a blip on the radar.
It is funny, like some people will be like, they'll have a lot of bad days and they just kind of gloss them over. They're not really cognizant of it. They'll think, I eat fine. I eat great. I stick to my meal plan. And then you're like, oh, really? So when you use that tool, it kind of, it sheds some actual light on what's really going on. And then there's the opposite people who do great, and they have one bad evening or whatever, like they blow their diet, and I'm terrible at this. I'm always cheating on my diet, and they're the opposite. You have to kind of, well, look, you have all these. You hit this day, you hit this day, you hit this day. Yeah, you had this one bad day, big deal. One day. So it's good for both types of people, like to have this kind of hyper focused approach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. So something else you mentioned where things really made sense, because I got to say, when I saw don't set a deadline, I'm like, oh man, Bryan, don't set a deadline. Oh, that not setting a deadline has screwed me up in the past too. But then I saw you mention the moving target, and I really like that because I think that kind of ties it in. It's like, all right, set a deadline, but realize it's probably you may not hit it, or like you summed it up perfectly where you mentioned, all right, you do your check, you hit that deadline, and you're like, okay, did I achieve my goal? Am I where I'm at? If I hit my thing, boom, all right, time to move on to the next goal. If not, all right, how much longer do we think we need to push it in order to achieve that goal? So setting a deadline kind of gives you some direction. It creates some sort of urgency, but don't stress over it so much. Know that it's okay to move it a week or two, especially when life happens or just shit falls out there. You gotta, don't beat yourself up if things don't go 100% to plan, because they rarely ever do. And the people who are completely rigid, I've got to stick to this, they're not all that happy. They're the ones that are like begging, they're dying for that burger at the end. They're the ones that are like, oh, I didn't go to that party with my best friend the other night because I'm dieting right now, and I can't. Like, well, that's bullshit. Like, physique mastery is both you're mastering your physique, but your life at the same time. It's mastering your life and enjoying life, living life to the fullest. That's all a part of what we're doing here. It's a waste of time if you're not having fun and contributing to the world just for the sake of getting ripped. So
I mean, there's always going to be. I think everyone should have one time where they really like, this is my deadline. But you have to kind of like build up to that. And, and there's going to be phases in your life where it's just not practical. Like right now, like you and I were both going through these diet things. And you and I are both kind of extending it because, it's been summer, we're busy. And just, if you have the option, like, why wouldn't you, if you have the option to say, give yourself an extra week or two, why wouldn't you do that? Mm-hmm. Like, it just seems to me, it's so much less pressure, provided you're not using it as an excuse to be less disciplined. But if it takes that pressure off, it makes the whole process more enjoyable. Like, why wouldn't you embrace that?
Exactly. And like for myself, when I was setting that calendar, that 12-month calendar, I planned in the potential for vacations, all my fat loss phases should take me 2 weeks less than what I have there, and it's just short fat loss phases that I have there. I gave myself a little extra cushion. I can let loose at times. So I think that's, if you're gonna set a deadline, give yourself a little bit more time than you think it's going to take, because it always takes longer than you anticipate. So I think that's where having a deadline can come into play. Rather than a moving deadline, it can still move, but if you kind of plan for the movement ahead of time, it gives you a little bit.
And I think that's another thing too. And I think, not to dump on fellow coaches, but a lot of some coaches screw this up, is that when you're setting a deadline for somebody else, like, that, you should be very, very cautious. I mean, you should always, or when you're setting a deadline for yourself, for that matter, but it's like you should give a buffer, at least 4 weeks, in my opinion. Only the very, very experienced or gifted physique person can cruise in right, without any trouble. I mean, gosh, like 90% of coaching, like at that level, it's often picking up the pace and pressing and, trying to like fit stuff in because you fall behind. So if you have that option at the beginning to like have a much more reasonable deadline, say if you think you have a 12-week diet is enough to get you there, but you plan for 18 weeks, that just makes sense. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just such a much more enjoyable process.
Totally.
Whenever I see whenever I see a 12-week diet, I'm like, oh boy, I hope this person is well initiated and doesn't have much fat to lose.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I look at myself, and I dropped 10 pounds during this cutting phase, which for me at my size, it's a pretty significant percentage of my weight. I could have did that in probably 8 to 10 weeks if I was serious and disciplined. No problem. It's been 16 weeks for me, so it's been extended. But I've enjoyed my summer. I went away for 10 days and gained 3 to 4 pounds during that time. So I had to spend a couple weeks losing that weight that I gained during that time. But I mean, it's all these different little mini vacations that I've had along the way, or little diet breaks along the way, have made this process more manageable and more enjoyable. And I have been focused on the daily targets. So having that big goal, because I see a lot of people run into trouble with setting that. So say a 12-week, give yourself that buffer. Okay, I've got 18 weeks, but they think it's almost like it's so far ahead. They're like, I can coast right now. So I think that's where you have to say, if you're going to set a longer deadline, you really got to make sure that you're focused on the weekly tasks at hand and the daily tasks at hand. Focus on the process for sure and start right now, because I see, like you said, so many people will they'll fall off the wagon, or they won't be as strict on themselves. And all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, I've only got so many weeks left for this. I've got to crash diet now. I've got to hit the treadmill twice a day. And so they're trying to make up for lost time. That just creates the excess stress and doesn't make the process very enjoyable, and just can do more harm than good. So I think that's really where the importance of the daily goals the daily goals are more important than the long-term deadline, I'd say.
That's probably something I should have put in the articles. Like, the only thing where, setting a rigid deadline, that can be bad, but even worse is just no deadline whatsoever and having some like nebulous goal, like, I really want to get in shape. Like, that's going to get you nowhere. You gotta have some type of a framework, but just, trying to pigeonhole yourself into a really rigid deadline when it's not necessary. You can always tell when someone's never done the process before, is that they always think, it's just going to be cake, man. Right. I gotta lose 10 pounds. I'll set 12 weeks. Boom. It's just like, dude, body doesn't cooperate the way you always want it to. So if you can afford to be a little more, liberal with your deadline, why wouldn't you?
Yeah. 100%, man. 100%. Yeah, it's an experience, and I think for me, the one reason I set the deadline and I looked at the whole year advance is because I found myself being haphazard with my goals, and really having two goals. And I think a lot of us do have it in our minds that I want to get leaner, but I want to build muscle at the same time. So, and especially if you're at a point where you're looking decent, I'm like, all right, I have a bad week. I'm like, you know what? I need to build muscle anyways. And so I really didn't fully commit to my cut. It took me a long time to fully commit to my cut. And I realized like once I set a deadline that it helped me. It gave me that little bit of incentive and created a little bit more of that urgency. When I looked back at this year as a total, I spent way more time in fat loss mode than I should have, because even though there was weeks in there where I'd fall off my diet, I'd be more relaxed on my diet, it wasn't focused attention on building muscle. So it's not like a week of relaxing on my diet where I'm like, fuck, I didn't lose fat this week. That week really didn't help me build muscle. I need quality time dedicated towards muscle building. I think that's what really sparked me to set out a plan. Was I want to make sure that I am ending my cut a lot shorter than what I've allowed myself to do now, and I'm keeping my fat in check, and it's going to give me more time to build muscle throughout the year if I stay a little bit more focused with my time. So that was my way of thinking with that planning, and this is the first time I've ever done it. We'll see how I can stick to this plan. Chances are it's not going to go go right how I want it to go, but I think it'll keep me a little bit more in check than I have been in the past. And certainly, as you alluded to earlier, like vacations and stuff, when you know in advance there's stuff that's coming up that you can either plan to finish a cut for, or a time where you know you don't want to be cutting anymore. Like, to be honest, this summer it's not easy dieting during the summertime. I'm glad this is the first summer ever where I finished leaner than when I started. But I think next year I really want to make sure I'm in maintenance mode during the summer. I don't want to be cutting. I want to be able to enjoy myself even a little bit more than what I did this year. I'm really happy with how I have been able to enjoy myself during the summer and still burn fat, but summer will be even more enjoyable next year when I can just maintain my body weight during that time.
Yeah, I think the biggest lesson I learned, and I've learned this every year, but I guess I always seem to forget. I have to be, maybe it's my genetics, I don't know. Like, I can build muscle relatively without being terribly intentional. Like, I don't have to be, I got to get into it. I don't have to be one of these dudes who forces into a surplus. And I see these videos of guys, trying to get 700 grams of carbs in and eating all kinds of shit. And like, for me, I just eat a little bit more liberally and I can build muscle. On the flip side, though, if I want to lose fat, I have to be extremely intentional. And I always have to be more focused, more intentional than I think when I start. Like just cleaning up the diet doesn't really, it gets the ball rolling, but I have to be a lot more focused, and especially to get in really good shape. I have to be more strict than I would like to be. So, but then I get the benefit on the other side. When it's time to build muscle, I just kind of chill out on the diet a bit, like eat a bit more carbs, eat a bit more, and just strength comes and fullness comes, and I don't get huge by any stretch, but I make progress.
Right.
So that's just that's one thing that I've learned over the years. But I definitely need that intentional focus. I'm not one of these guys who's like skips a meal and loses 3 pounds of fat. You know what I mean? I got to be focused and intentional. So there's always some people one in a million has both.
Right.
But most people kind of have one type of body. So that got drilled down to me this year. But yeah.
Very cool. Individual difference. Definitely important factor. Very cool. I think excellent conversation. Again, incredible freaking article. Secrets of getting ripped that no one talks about and few understand. Check it out at bryankrahn.com. I'll have a link directly to the article down below. Again, visit Bryan's site, visit metabolicmasterpiece.com. I'll have a link to my 12-month plan. They can kind of see the contrast there and just see how my way of thinking involved in that as well. Hope you enjoyed this episode of Physique Mastery. We will catch you next time.
See you.